I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Right in the intro, we try to remain anonymous. That's the second A in AA. The first one is alcoholics. That's how I identify. And the second A is anonymous. But what does it mean to be anonymous? Is it relevant to today? And so why do people in AA remain anonymous? What's your thoughts on this, Steve?
Hey, Matt. Nice to be with you again today. Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I've gone through different variations of how I felt about this when I came in the first time, way back when. I was very private with who I told. I didn't tell anybody. And I shouldn't even say that. Even this time, nobody at work really knew. I didn't tell most of the people I worked with that I was an alcoholic. I certainly didn't tell them I was in AA. But they all knew I didn't drink. And there's a few reasons for that for me. One is there still is this, this idea, this thought of what an alcoholic really is, right? We talk about, you say it always, right? Guys in trench coat with one bulb hanging over, a smoke-filled room maybe back in the day. There still are some people who view alcoholics in that way. So, it's interesting. When I just jump back, when I first got sober, 95, I was really involved at the church I was at for a while. And I had taken on a lot of responsibilities that I realized I couldn't handle, which is another story. And I went up to the rector at the time and told him, I'm like, hey, listen, I have a problem. I need to go get some help. And I'll never forget. He told me, because I was really involved, I was assistant treasurer. He's like, be careful who you tell, like in the church environment. So, that always stuck with me. I think that might have been a big reason why that first time through, I didn't tell a lot of people, I feel very differently about it today. Today, I don't care who knows. And today, I'm very comfortable with me being out there so that I could help other people.
Where did this start anyways? Let's go back to the beginning. My son was asking about this because I was asking my son as we were driving to Chipotle for some food. I'm like, ooh. Why don't you give me, what did you say ooh for?
Ew, I love Chipotle.
Oh, I love that place.
Yeah.
So good. So bad for you, but it was so good.
It's okay.
I asked him, well, why don't you give me a topic? And of course, that set him off to perfectionism. I go, okay, so this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm thinking about is anonymity. And he was asking me, well, why do people stay anonymous? And I'm like, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So what was the original origin of anonymity and why?
Yeah, the original thought behind it was that it was a small group of guys, right, who were a lot of professionals. They had a standing in the community. I don't know about that. A lot of these guys were pretty bad drunks. I'm not sure that Bill Wilson had much standing in the community by the time he got sober. But a lot of people who they were trying to help would come in, right? We talk about it all the time. It was 1935. It was a lot of white guys, affluent, they were looking to help. They were doctors, Dr. Bob, and there were all kinds of higher echelon people, and then we talked about it, right? The Oxford group, which was geared towards that group of that higher echelon of people
of influence,
right? People of influence, people of wealth, people of all this kind of stuff, right? So so there was no, we couldn't get this out there, right? We can't let people know that we're recovering alcoholics. And then it went on, right, that it was put out there to protect the program itself. Once that got going, it's the old thing of if you're out there screaming from a mountaintop, hey, look at me, I'm sober, AA saved me, and then 2 weeks from now you're out there drunk, it may hurt the program by people saying, hey, yeah, see, AA doesn't work. And that's still a problem today, right? I mean, there's still a problem today, like, oh, this stuff doesn't work, People still feel that way.
That was the one thing that I told my son, is that it's protecting the program and protecting the group, because if somebody goes out there and runs their mouth off and then they start drinking, it hurts the program and therefore it hurts other people. Here's another way I've understood it, is if you're an AA and you break your anonymity, you may put the people who are around you at risk. the people who don't want to break their anonymity. So if they know that you are open and they can see the people you're hanging out with, well, they must be in the program too. So there's some thoughts around that.
Yeah, there's no question, right? When just a few years ago, right? Well, I've been around for 12 going on 13 years now, right? So when social media became a big thing, there was a lot of talk through programs of trying to stay anonymous on social media for exactly that reason, right? Now, listen, you're out on social media, right? You're open in your stuff. Your picture's out there running this podcast and doing all this kind of stuff, so you're open to it. What happens is, I see a lot of people. I don't share anything. I don't share, like a lot of people out there. We see them. They'll get a yearly coin, and they'll take a picture of it and they'll post it on their Facebook or something.
Oh, that pisses John off. Oh, this is pissing
off. I see that from other people or people talking about it. And this is not in a group, it's not in a closed group, right? This is in public that, many people can see, or at least it looks that way to me. My point is, but so then people start saying, oh, if this guy's in recovery and Steve's one of his friends and Steve likes this post, then Steve must be in recovery too, right? And just what you're saying, how, people can make some deductions and thinks like, hey, Steve must be in recovery, right? Just because of some of the things that I've done on social media.
Our buddy Howard L., who does the AA recovery interviews, he did our podcast. We'll look back in the archive and listen to that one because Howard was outstanding. He really takes it to the 10th degree in his show. He keeps total anonymity, and he'll edit out if you have a reference to a place near you. He'll take it out. Like he has 100%, I keep it anonymous, and I very much respect that. Having said that, in the podcasting business, it's tough to market your show if you keep it totally anonymous. That's a very difficult thing, which is the main reason I do what I do on social media, because it brings attention to the show, and I'm bringing attention to a show that can help other people. You kind of have to do it if you want to grow.
I don't think there's any question that if we're going to do a podcast, right, which is a fairly new medium of getting stuff out there, even though it's been around for a while, right? It's sort of has really matured a lot where you got lots of big names and people out there. I think if you're going to do a podcast or if you're going to do something in that realm of electronic media type stuff, you need to get the word out. How do you get the word out? How do you drive people, even if it's just like this, all free, whatever it might be? How do you drive people to this place so that they may be able to find some help? And that can only be done by getting getting your name out there, getting on social media, and letting people know where you are.
I found out about this yesterday, and I don't know where the heck I have been, but we have somebody that we know in one of our meetings who listens to a podcast on Barstool Sports, which is a recovery podcast. It's called Friends of Jerry, and right on the cover is a coin with basically the AA logo, and Jerry is not anonymous, and he interviews celebrities and stuff. It's another person out there with the logo, and I'm sure he does incredibly well with this. So it's kind of, if you want to be in this, get the message out, there's other people who are going to step out. I was thinking a lot about this as well because I was starting to watch the Bill W. movie on Amazon Prime, basically because Bill Shaberg modestly chastised me for not seeing it. He's all over it, but the people who are in AA are shaded. So they're like in shadow, but the shadows are so ridiculous that you can see who they are. So they get to Bill, and it's like, well, that's Bill. It's very clear to me that it's Bill who's in there. And Bill will tell you, I'm in that movie. I'm in all over that movie, as they should, because he's one of the foremost experts. But I'm just looking at some of these experts they have because they're in AA, they're shaded. And I'm like, this is kind of silly.
Yeah, but it is a tradition, right? It is out there that it's one of those things that was set down years and years ago about being anonymous until that changes, right? And which I don't think that'll ever change, right? I don't think that'll ever change as being one of the traditions, one of the principles of AA.
Well, the program would just be
right.
A then.
Yeah. Right. I think it's out there, and I think there's good reason to have that for a lot of reasons we've talked about, right? Listen, this whole program, and not even just AA, but society in general, filled with a lot of egos, right? And if you let people's egos run wild, and one of the things that Bill Wilson wrote about was that, right? Bill Wilson even talked about it himself, like Bill Wilson had an ego. So by putting some of these checks and balances in there, you're able to check those egos a little bit. I know it could have been a problem for me. I mean it. Like I'm a scream, I'm an oversharer of information. I'm loud. I'm opinionated. All of those things. Like this helped me early on to make sure that I wasn't getting out of hand. So there's good things on it. Like I said, today is different. I've been through it today. One of the things I want to do is be able to help as many people as possible. And I can only do that if people know that I'm in the program. And that doesn't mean I put it out in public, but I don't hide it, right? Like now when I have a conversation with somebody, I've talked about it with a neighbor across the street. If I have a conversation that I don't drink, typically I follow that up with I'm in recovery, just so they know. Just in case they have a brother, a sister, somebody else, maybe their husband, maybe they have a problem, that they go, oh, Steve's in the program, maybe I could ask him about this. So I want that to be available to people nowadays at this point in my life, but not everybody feels this way, right? We had a thing the other day where, somebody shared at our meeting that they did not want to break their anonymity at work. They knew somebody who probably they thought could be, helped, and they didn't. And that's fine. Like whatever your position is okay. I happened to go up to that person after the meeting and I said, I got a solution for you. Give him my number. Just say, hey, I know this guy. That's all you have to do. I know this guy who might be able to help you. You don't even have to explain how you know me. You can tell me I'm a friend of your sister, whatever. I mean, if you have to tell a white lie. And I said, give him my number. And actually, it was his mother, this person's mother. I said, give his mother my number. Tell him, not his mother, to give me a call. I thought that was a perfect solution for that, because
it's a great solution.
It took him out of the picture and still gave this person maybe a chance to get some help if he chose to.
I look at anonymity as more than black and white. It can get very easy to say there's a black and white to anonymity. You don't tell anybody about anything and you don't put your name out there. I would say Howard is more on the black and white scale to some level. I think there are shades of gray in here. Although I put my face out there, I try not to put my last name out there, but it wouldn't be that hard to figure out who I am. But I also try and be careful with my language. If I will refer sometimes to AA, but I try and refer to it as recovery, as sobriety, as a program of trying to be careful of the language, because I look at anonymity as I'm not speaking for any particular organization. I'm speaking for me. So if I'm talking about it, this is what was going on at this meeting, my recovery group. I'm sober. And I think that's a way of tiptoeing around it. I think you can do that. I think the other thing is people might ask is, okay, if you're anonymous, do you know who the other people are at a meeting? Well, what's the answer to that?
Not always. Not always. I mean, the truth is, if you go to meetings, if you go to a meeting for years and years and years, you will get to know people. But I've been going to meetings for years and years and years, and I don't know people, right? I mean, I know them by their first name, maybe their last initial. And many times, obviously, of course, if we get into smaller groups, some of our meetings, of course, you get to know these people by their full names. But the majority of people in a meeting, if I go to a meeting and there's 40 people, no, I may know 10 of them, maybe 15 of them really by name and like have a relationship with them that I'll know their name. The other guys are just, they're just Marks and Johns and Tonys and that's all. But they do come with a phone number typically. I have phone numbers for these guys, and this is the amazing thing is even if I don't know their last name, they'll still pick up the phone for me. It's interesting to say that our buddy Edson mentioned at a meeting a couple months ago now that the brother of one of the guys who came to our meeting, not regularly, regularly, but not every week. He would show up on a regular basis, and that might mean every 3 or 4 weeks he would show up. And I asked him, like, I'll have to look for the information in the obituaries. And he said, I don't know his last name. Right? And that's one of the problems with this.
Right.
Maybe you want to go down and see him. Well, how do you go down and see somebody in the hospital if you don't know their last name? But yeah, I mean, you know some people, you don't know some people. And again, we know guys, especially one, right? Dave B, forever, since I've ever met the guy, says his full name in every meeting.
Yes.
Hey, I'm Dave, and his last name, and I'm an alcoholic. All right, so he chooses to do it that way all the time.
And nobody calls him Dave. They call him by his full name as though it's one name. Hey,
right.
Dave Bleep is doing this. Or,
right.
Hey, Dave Bleep is doing that.
You're right. You do, because that's the way he introduces himself.
Well, when I was brand new, I asked him about that. And he told me, he goes, I have every right to break my anonymity. You have no right to break my anonymity. So just because I give my name doesn't mean I'm giving you permission.
Yeah, that's actually true, although confusing to some people, and especially new people. But that is an absolutely true statement. My wife and I had to, and I've said this before, right? When I got sober this last time, I got married to a woman at a time when I wasn't drinking, and I was, air quotes, if you will, in recovery. Although I wasn't doing a meeting. She didn't know how it worked. She had no clue. So I was far away from being sober. But when I relapsed, and when she found out that I relapsed, I realized that I had no control over who she was going to tell, right? And I used to, she worked in a school situation. I used to laugh about it. I'm like, she's probably in there telling the janitor. You know what I found out? My husband's a drunk, and he's in, that I couldn't stop, right? Because she sort of had a right to do that because of the way I behaved. We can't break anybody else. It's hard. It's one of these subjects that does come up on a regular basis in meetings because people forget about it. And I do think as time goes on, with all the social media and now Zoom and that kind of stuff, like, you really have to be careful with it because, again, you can break yours, but you can't break mine.
I watched the movie The Anonymous People 8 years ago now, it seems like, because it was on Netflix at the time and now it's not. I think you have to buy the movie. If you have not seen the movie The Anonymous People, I would highly recommend it. Great movie. And it really talks a lot about anonymity. And one of the main tenets is we've done ourselves some harm being so anonymous because we don't have a way of lobbying for ourselves. So every interest group has a way of lobbying to move themselves ahead. You can look at, I'll give you an example, AIDS groups in the 1980s. So this is a pretty marginalized group at the time in the 1980s. Groups like ACT UP were out there really pushing forward, and people with AIDS were looked at as lepers who brought it upon themselves because these are gay men. That was predominantly the view. And we would look at that as cavemen now. We've come so far. But because we had these activists in groups like ACT UP push forward with funding and research, we've come a long way, and we've come to acceptance. But we don't have that organization for alcoholics to push ourselves forward. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's a school of thought that anonymity has held us back and has held the stigma in place because we don't have a way of pushing ourselves forward to show examples of where it works and the example of how people can change and how this can enhance your life.
I think that's a great point, Matt. I think that is a big reason. I mean, there's other reasons too. There's monetary reasons and all, but I do think that's a big reason why there's so many people out there doing recovery that is not AA, right? Through social media,
right?
Is because then they can push it. They can, go out there and even, advertise whatever they can. They can advocate, as you say, for themselves to try to get people. And they have many of them have the same intentions and the same thoughts as AA, out there really just trying to help people, get sober, and not really looking like, hey, I'm trying to find this program that's going to make me rich. No, I'm out there just trying to build this community, right? We see a lot of women out there, right? We've talked about a lot of women out on social media doing groups, doing Instagram, doing TikToks, doing stuff like that. I mean, I follow a bunch of women who I really love their messages on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I just love, and like they have like 80-something% female followers, right? And I'm just, I'm one of the 12% of guys, but their messages are so good. And they're out there and they're doing it. And they're not AA. They're not preaching AA, right? They're doing other stuff. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they're like, well, I can't do AA because then I can't really push it. I can't push it out there, I can't advocate for it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Some of those groups, and I'll tell you, some of those groups, like you said, the AIDS group in the 80s, I mean, man, that took a lot of guts to get out there. That was a tough time.
Absolutely.
I remember that well. It was a scary time for everybody. I knew people who were in that community, and it was a very, very scary time. But they did, and, politically, there was a lot of problems going on at that time. With, just like you said, it was like, hey, you brought it upon yourself. But they got out there, and they got it done. And today, it's very different.
So I think there's that point of view. I will tell you, if I'm on social media and I see people advocating for AA, I think that's a different story for me. That rubs me the wrong way. But I think you can do this without advocating for AA. I think there are ways you can dance around it and say you're sober, you have recovery. Here are some tips to stay sober. Here are some things you can work on. You can be a member of AA and put a message out there with all the sober stuff and divorce it from AA.
I do think you do a good job with that when you were talking about when you put your stuff out there on social media. I see a lot of that stuff, and you're not pushing AA. You're pushing sobriety, you're pushing recovery. If you do mention it, it's as a path of recovery, but you're not speaking for it. One of the things it just popped in my head. I know we talked about this last year too, but when John and I went up to Maine to hike Katahdin last summer, we were driving around back and forth, and all of a sudden on the radio, if you remember this, came a commercial for AA. And both John, I was sitting there dumbfounded. I'm like, are we hearing this right? And apparently we ended up going to a meeting, and I brought it up to somebody out there. And apparently there's some recovery center, right? It's a recovery center that runs those commercials, but they are blatantly using AA's name in their commercials. Mm-hmm. And we were just blown away. I don't know if I still have it on my phone, but I actually recorded it because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Because that's one of the things that you never hear. So it is interesting, right? That people do different things, and until somebody called them up and forces them to take it off the air, I guess they're going to keep running it. I'm not sure if that's happened.
I don't think anybody would do that, because then that runs afoul of another tradition that you don't want to bring controversy.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's worse, calling them on it? Right. So this is where AA so I'm going to talk in terms of AA from the third person. AA is really funny because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It's the whole Jim Irsay went and bought the manuscript for the AA book with the idea as I'll give it to GSO.
All right.
Well, they couldn't take it because then they'd be taking this big gift, and it'll cause and now we can't sue somebody because that's going to cause controversy too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but you're right. I'm not sure that would actually stop them, but I think they could ask them to stop them. They probably wouldn't sue them, but they could ask them to stop it. But you're right. And, again, I think that, if you ask people who've been around for a while, they would say that most of these traditions, most of these policies, if you will, that they have in the long run work in the favor of the way AA works. Now, again, things are changing, and I don't know if AA is going to have to change. We'll have to see, right? The organizational structure is not going to change. For people who don't know, AA is built from the bottom up, not from the top down, right? So it's everything starts and all the direction comes from the group level, not the main office in New York's level. Who knows? Who knows where it's going to go? I mean, we talk about it all the time, how, things need to be updated, and maybe the organizational structure itself has to be looked at, just like you said, for some of these reasons. I'm not sure that'll happen in our lifetime.
One of the ways I knew that alcoholism existed, and even though this ad doesn't talk about AA, there are two ads I remember growing up when I was a little kid that I saw a lot about alcoholism. And the movie talks about this, The Anonymous People, that there was this wave in the 70s and early 80s where a lot of people were coming forward. Dick Van Dyke was one of those people that when he got sober, he was very much out there. Bob Welch, who was a pitcher for the Dodgers and the A's, had something out there. And I knew that Jason Robards was an alcoholic because I heard this ad.
Jason Robards.
I'm Jason Robards, and I'm alcoholic. I thought only losers became alcoholics. Then I learned it's a disease that could have killed me. I don't drink anymore. And now I really know what success is all about. Not just with my career, but with my wife, my children, and my life. I'm living proof you don't have to die for a drink.
Get help like Jason Robards got. Call the National Council on Alcoholism in your area.
So it doesn't say AA in there.
Yeah.
It's very careful there. But that ad is what taught me that alcoholism was a disease. And every time I saw Jason Robards in a movie, I thought about him as an alcoholic.
Yeah.
From that ad.
Of course, you wouldn't be able to unsee that in your mind as a kid, especially, right? Like, oh, this guy's an alcoholic. And again, what does that mean, right? Everybody especially when you're younger, what does that mean? Somebody's an alcoholic.
He's an alcoholic, but he doesn't drink anymore. That's what runs through my head every time I saw Jason Robards. That guy's an alcoholic, but he doesn't drink anymore.
Interesting. That how old were you when you saw that? Do you know?
Probably anywhere between 3 and 5.
No kidding.
If I were to back that up of when that ad was out there, around 5.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's young to remember that.
Yeah, I remember when the whole thing with Jimmy Carter going in the hospice.
Right.
I remember a press conference that Jimmy Carter was doing, and I had to have been 4 or 5. It probably was sometime in the late 70s or 1980.
Right.
But I remember seeing him on TV as president.
Yeah. Huh.
So I got more of a memory than I think.
No, you do, if you have those memories. 'Cause I don't have those memories. I don't have those 5-year-old memories. Vaguely stuff. I just don't know what's real and what's not real. Like, did I see that? Even some of the things like the moon landing and stuff like that. Like, did I actually see it, or do I remember watching it on the news or something? And I don't remember. But that's an interesting thing that at 5 years old you heard, and it's interesting that you heard that and then you end up becoming an alcoholic, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, I'm the same as Jason Robards.
I'll take Jason Robards' life path after he got sober.
Absolutely.
He had some pretty good stuff out there. But there's that view of, that presentation's pretty damn good.
Right.
Bob Welch, showing him striking out Reggie Jackson in the World Series. It's a pretty good message. And I remember from that ad, and it stuck in my mind when in the 1990 ALCS when Roger Clemens was screaming at him, "Drink milk," right. which is I guess is a slur against alcoholics. Stop drinking, but he was screaming that from the dugout at Bob Welch.
Drink milk.
Clemens is a prick.
He is. But it's interesting because back in those days, again, this program was around long, but back in those days, there's still I listen. I remember when I came in. I know we know guys who came in that time in the in the 80s for sure. It was very different. It still was it was a program that just was still hidden in the shadows. It really was. And that's why that commercial is such a big deal, or Bob Welch coming out. It's such a big deal. And I do remember some other people coming out, but I remember that time too, and thinking, not understanding what an alcoholic was, right? Not understanding how you got sober. Like, how do you do that? How do you stop drinking? All interesting stuff. Like I said, it's a complicated, complex situation as to where you want to go. Like I said, nowadays I'm willing to reach out and try to help as many people as I can. Getting to the point now where, a lot of younger guys are coming in. I remember, I don't know if it was Chip saying that or no, it was Dick. I remember it was Dick P. Friday night meeting. We were talking about sponsorship and how you get to a certain age where younger guys are coming in. And when I say younger guys, I'm talking about their 30s, your age, even 40s, right? And a lot of these guys are looking for younger people that they are going to, sort of feel more comfortable with rather than an older guy. And I'm sort of heading into that thing where, I don't see as many people. Although a guy came up to me Friday night and asked me, hey, we were talking about it, and I told him what he needed to do. Needed to reach out to somebody, and he asked me if I would help him, and I said, sure, of course, yeah, I'd be willing to help you. And I haven't heard from him, so hopefully he will. Hopefully he'll come back. Hopefully he'll come back Friday night, and he'll continue to try to get it, and he'll find his way.
Well, Chip's 147, and he still has 20-year-old guys he sponsors. They seek him out.
Chip does. Chip does, and I do know that he's one of the guys who does have those guys. And that also because Chip's all around, right? And again, we talked a little bit about that last night at our meeting where, I asked Chip, how many guys have you sponsored? And what he said, about 30 guys. So the word gets out, right? Word gets out.
That number's low.
I'd be willing to bet too. I thought
that number...
Yeah,
that's low.
Because in my short career, I told him, I'm not only talking about guys who have successfully stayed sober, but how many guys have you done? Because I probably worked with pushing a dozen guys, most of them not staying sober, but I worked with them. I took them through the steps. Whether they stay sober is up to them and not up to me.
Maybe 30 guys with 20 years or more that he's been sponsoring.
I agree. I mean, he said that number. I didn't want to, I thought it was kind of low, but anyway, and Chip is a guy. Chip knows. Listen, he has that reputation that if you really want to get sober, he would be a guy that you might want to look up.
He won't raise his hand when it comes time to say who's willing to sponsor, and he won't say no if you ask him.
Yeah, right.
He's fired a few people, but
yeah,
he won't say no if you're doing the right things. Well, this is a sensitive topic, and we would love to hear what you have to say. Even you, Mr. Oldtimer.
Fuck you!
I figured that's what you would think about this topic. If you have thoughts on this, go to soberfriendspod.com. You can email right from the website. You can reach us at soberfriendspod on Instagram. That's where I kind of communicate the most. Give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast if you think we're worth it. Same thing on Spotify. Steve, thanks for coming on and having a great show tonight.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. And it's always good to get together and do this. And out there in podcast land, look us up, give us a yell, and pass it on. If you're getting something from this podcast, pass it on.
And if you're getting something from this podcast, it's a bonus because you kept me sober tonight.
Me too.
So we'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.